Please click on the subscribe button so you get notified when the latest content drops. Now, let's kick it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here are my top 10 quarterbacks for the upcoming season. So let's start off with the obvious number one. Do I need to say anything? It's Patrick Mahomes, ladies and gentlemen. Do I really need to explain why? He beat my Niners in the Super Bowl. He's coming off back-to-back Super Bowl winning seasons. He is the next in line to be the greatest of all time. If he's not already in some people's opinion, Patrick Mahomes is on a tier of his own. Nobody can scratch that number one spot. It's literally Patrick Mahomes, 50 tons of shit, and then number two, if you ask me. If you don't have Patrick Mahomes as number one, then you're fucking delusional, and I'm sorry about that. Number two, ladies and gentlemen, has to go to the reigning MVP, Lamar Jackson. Personally, I would prefer Joe Burrow, but because Joe Burrow is so injury prone, even though he is a pocket passing quarterback who has gotten his team to a Super Bowl, I have to give Lamar Jackson his credit, mainly because he's coming off a season where he won the MVP and only lost to the reigning Super Bowl champions in the AFC Championship game. If a couple plays go their way, they don't fumble the ball, maybe the Ravens are in that Super Bowl and maybe my Niners are the champions. With that being said, Lamar is firmly in the number two spot just because he's been able to stay healthy. He's been able to show that he can throw the ball down the field, and because Joe Burrow has been injury prone. Moving on to number three. Although Joe Burrow has been injury prone, Joe Burrow is Joe Cool, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to pressure situations, when it comes to winning games that are important, Joe Burrow has showed up for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's even been able to beat Mahomes in an AFC Championship game to make it to a Super Bowl. Even though they didn't win it and lost to Matt Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams, I believe Joe Burrow, even with his injuries, is still the third best quarterback in the NFL today. His demeanor, his size, his accuracy, and the fact that he's made the Cincinnati Bengals a viable franchise goes a very long way, in my opinion. If Joe Burrow is able to stay healthy, he's not only a threat to the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC North, he's also a threat to the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe a bigger threat than Lamar Jackson, to be frank. But again, because Lamar Jackson is coming off an MVP season where he was asked to do more and did do more, Lamar is number two and Joe Burrow this year is number three. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's where I throw my first real curveball. To some, this spot would go to Josh Allen, but personally, I have to give my number four spot to Brock motherfucking Purdy, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll tell you why. Brock, since he's been the starter for the San Francisco 49ers, has elevated the Pro Bowl All-Star caliber roster that he has on the San Francisco 49ers. Let's not act like Joe Burrow didn't have great weapons in Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, or when Patrick first got into the league, he didn't have a great running back in Kareem Hunt, who was in his prime, Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, who was not a scrub, ladies and gentlemen, and Travis Kelce, to name a few weapons that he had. The 49ers offense prior to having Brock as the starter with Jimmy G did not look as good as it looked with Brock as the starter. When Jimmy was the starter, Debo and Kittle were the only two pass catchers that would produce. Once Brock became the starter, that's when we started talking about Brandon Ayuk as a legitimate number one. That's when we actually got to see Juwan Jennings take a step forward in his progression. Yes, I understand having CMC is great, but he doesn't unlock the offense like Brock does. When the Niners had Mostert, the Dolphins running back, who is, in my opinion, underrated, he was putting up great numbers similar to CMC. I'm comfortable saying that if something were to happen to CMC, the Niners offense would still function well because we got Elijah Mitchell, who's been in the system forever, who, when he was the starter, put up decent numbers. His problem was just being injury prone, and we have a couple of backs that might actually pan out who are still young. God forbid anything happens to Brock, because if we lose him, I don't think we can make it to the playoffs, let alone make a run for a championship this upcoming year. I still believe Brock was robbed from his All-Pro selection by Dak, who had no business being an All-Pro this year. It should have been Brock, and you saw that in the playoffs when it mattered the most. Moving on to number 5, ladies and gentlemen. Personally, I put CJ Stroud there. I liked his rookie season. I believed he took big steps in his development. Houston got better this upcoming year. The additions of Stephon Diggs to the offense plus Joe Mixon, especially because Ben Slowick is literally a Kyle Shanahan disciple. I expect big things from CJ Stroud this upcoming year, and I believe he will be the 5th best quarterback in the league in this upcoming season. Another year in that system that's super friendly to quarterbacks as long as he doesn't put the ball in harm's way. If CJ Stroud has another season similar to his rookie year, but he elevates his numbers, especially with all the additions that he's going to have, he might be the 2nd best quarterback in the league by the end of the year if he can stay healthy. Number 6, I would have to go with Josh Allen, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why is because Josh Allen has lost a lot of weapons this upcoming year. Can he elevate his roster with the talent that he has around him to still be a viable contender in the AFC? I just don't know. When Josh Allen has been asked to do more for the Buffalo Bills, that's when more mistakes are committed, costing his team wins. When he was asked to do less last year, they managed to do more as a team. If they can establish a run game in Buffalo, that's going to help elevate Josh Allen on what he can do on that field and maybe elevate where I have him on my personal list. But because I know Josh Allen is so mistake prone, I can't put him any higher than Lamar, who has been the MVP twice in the league. I can't put him higher than Joe Burrow, who has been to a Super Bowl and beaten Patrick Mahomes when it's mattered the most. I can't even put him above CJ Stroud because of the fact that CJ has done more for the Texans in 1 year than Josh Allen has been able to do in his entire time in Buffalo. Buffalo had to go out of their way and get Stephon Diggs to give Josh Allen a real weapon because Josh Allen couldn't help develop the weapons that he had around him. CJ, before he got to Houston, we didn't know who Nico Collins or Tank Dell were. That's why I have Josh Allen 6th on my list. Number 7, ladies and gentlemen, I have to give it to Jared Goff. In my opinion, what he was able to do with Detroit after being traded from the Rams a couple of years ago deserves a lot of credit. He was able to stabilize a dysfunctional franchise. Yes, a lot of the credit has to go to the front office and Dan Campbell, who's the head coach. However, last year, Goff threw for over 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 12 picks, and had a 97.9 passer rating, and also had one of the best years of his career, to be completely frank with you, ladies and gentlemen. He managed to get Detroit to an NFC Championship game and even had a lead to my Niners before they ultimately collapsed. With the weapons he has around him, and also the fact he's gone toe-to-toe with Mahomes in the regular season in the past, he's also been to a Super Bowl and 2 NFC Championship games. Jared Goff, in my opinion, is the 2nd best quarterback in the NFC and 7th best quarterback in the league heading into the 2024-2025 season. Number 8, in my opinion, would go to Justin Herbert. He hasn't accomplished a lot in his career. He has the physical characteristics of an elite caliber quarterback. And now that he has Jim Harbaugh as his head coach, I expect him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league this upcoming year. Jim was able to turn around and save Alex Smith's career. And with the caliber of quarterback that Justin Herbert is, they should be favorites to make the playoffs. I don't know if they'll be able to challenge the Chiefs, but I can see them being a 10-win team this year and clinching a wild card spot. Herbert has been subject to horrendous coaching the last few years, especially when they've had an embarrassment of riches with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and Austin Eckler on the offensive side, and a loaded defense with Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Derwin James. See, that's also another thing. They'll rank Justin Herbert as a top 10 quarterback over Brock, but he's had great talent in his time in Los Angeles, and it's just been squandered because of bad coaching. With Jim Harbaugh and less talent on the roster, I believe we will see the best of Justin Herbert because he will need to be the best if the Chargers are going to be real contenders for the playoffs, not for the Super Bowl, but to make the playoffs this upcoming year. Number 9, I may have him a little bit too high, but I have to go with Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. He didn't play at all last year. He got hurt 4 plays into the season. And aside from the last year that he had with the Packers, where he was lacking a lot of motivation, I believe he still has that it factor in him that can help the Jets win important games and get them to the playoffs. Now, are they going to make any noise in the playoffs? I don't think so. But the experience, the wisdom, and he's coming off a torn Achilles, so his arm strength should still be there. Yes, Father Time is catching up with Aaron, but if he can manage to be 50% of what he was 2 years ago, I think Aaron Rodgers could be the 9th best quarterback in the league this upcoming season. I trust his football IQ, and I'm reluctantly putting him 9th because he didn't play last year. But he has such a big resume, a 4-time MVP, a former Super Bowl champion, that I gotta give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt and put him 9th on my top 10 list. He's also got great weapons in New York, so he should be a viable quarterback, if anything, this upcoming year. Last but not least, well, I guess he would be least in my top 10. I have to go with Jalen Hurts as my 10th best quarterback in the upcoming season. Yes, the Philadelphia Eagles season ended horribly last year, but prior to the horrible ending, the Eagles were 10-1 before they got ran through by my Niners and had a pretty impressive stretch of wins over Kansas City and the Buffalo Bills, teams that were legitimate contenders at the end of last season. I'm not going to put Dak Prescott in my top 10 list because when it comes to facing real contenders for the playoffs, Dak doesn't show up. Whether it be NFC contenders or AFC contenders, when it matters, he fails to really put on a display. He stat padded last year against a bunch of horrible teams, and when it mattered the most in the playoffs, he didn't show up. Jalen Hurts, however, has made it to the Super Bowl, has beaten my Niners. Granted, it was with an injury-stricken Brock Purdy leading the Niners in that NFC Championship game, but he was still in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. He played well in that Super Bowl against Patty. Jalen Hurts, although the season ended horribly last year for the Eagles, is still, in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback. Guys, have you heard? Shady Mob Productions is an official affiliate of HBO Max. Click on the link in the description and sign up so you can watch hit series like Hard Knocks, Game of Thrones, and House of Dragons. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when the latest content drops.